Hello, hello, hello. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon to everybody in the, morning. It's 11 o'clock in the Eastern time zone, and this is your Improvise, Adapt, and Overcome podcast. We're not telling war stories here. We're not really telling sob stories. Instead, we're talking about our military members, how they lead, how they follow, how they work, and most importantly, how they innovate. This whole idea of improvise, adapt, overcome. It's a mindset. It's a mindset that helps our service members overcome the most difficult physical hardships, mental hardships, and of course, spiritual hardships as well. And it helps them win in every single campaign, every single battlefield, and every single scenario, even off and out of the military, and could be of interest to all of you. That's what we're banking on. That's what we're going to talk about. And this is important for all of us because you win in the military by innovating, and you win in the corporate sector with businesses that know how to innovate and have those kind of people on your team. Anyway, enough about that. I'm your host. My name is Christian Anschuetz. I'm a proud Marine Corps veteran, served a couple active duty tours, and got out as a captain, as a matter of fact. I'm an entrepreneur and a corporate executive. I've been on management teams for a couple multi-billion-dollar companies, and I went from that and I founded a really great nonprofit, Project Reload. That's where we teach corporate executives, C-suite and line managers leadership, and we use transitioning military members to teach them that. And we do that by conducting military exercises on military bases with both military members and these corporate executives, and the experiences are nothing less than fantastic. We'll talk more about that later. More important, I should get to our guest. Our guest is a fascinating individual. His name is Mike Dana. He's actually General Mike Dana. I'm going to have to ask him which he wants me to call him, General or Mike. I kind of like General. It's nice. It's Lieutenant General Mike Dana, and I got a bio here. I'd like to read this, if I may. I'm going to look down at a piece of paper. Lieutenant General, retired. Mike Dana is an expert in strategic planning, organizational efficiency, and in fact, and kind of to the point, problem solving. He recently retired after 37 years of service in the United States Marine Corps, having last served as the director of the Marine Corps staff, essentially the chief of staff for the Marine Corps. During Mike's decade of service, he was the head logistician. That's a tongue tripper right there for the Marine Corps, deployed 10 times. Deployed almost a dozen times and served on joint duty three times, including Indo-Pacific. He has developed particular expertise in autonomous systems and additive manufacturing. Now, who would have thought? A Marine in autonomous system and additive manufacturing? We're going to end up talking about that. He is an executive fellow with the Institute for Defense and Business. He holds a master's degree from the Naval War College and is the graduate of the School of Advanced Warfighting. He has a BA from Union College out of New York. Mike, or Lieutenant General Mike Dana, welcome to our show.
Really appreciate being here today, and look forward to your questions. By the way, I want to say that when I looked at the two pictures at the beginning of the show, you look much younger, so good on you. We're about the same age, so that Marine Corps training benefited you greatly.
Yeah, it's all this, good lifestyle and good living, clean living that I've done since I got out of the Marine Corps. Nothing keeps a body young by using it, and that's one thing that the Marine Corps sure teaches you. It never goes away, does it?
It doesn't. Fitness is a way of life.
It is. Hey, I want to get to that. Should I be calling you General, Lieutenant General, or Mike? What do you prefer?
Oh, please call me Mike.
Mike. Oh, yeah. All right. I was hoping you were going to say General, because when I was a second lieutenant and captain, a general would walk into the room and they wouldn't even look at you and you'd freeze up, right? Because it was such how many lieutenant generals are there in the Marine Corps active duty at any time? Do you know that?
It's 13.
13. 13 out of a fighting force of roughly, let's say, 200,000-ish, somewhere.
Heading down to about 186,000. But the one thing I remember as a young officer is anytime a general officer was around, you didn't want to be around.
Yeah, there was some of that. That I'll go with that. That's true. Not that there was anything wrong with the generals. It's such a leap. When you're talking about 13 lieutenant generals out of a fighting force of about 170 then, right? Because of the drawdown. So around 170,000. If you were drawing a pyramid, you were at the tippy top. You're now top 1 or 2 pixels at the very top of that pyramid. And
I think what's important, Christian, and you lived this as a young officer, is though we're a pyramid on its side, because we're fortunate enough to be on the pointy end, but there's just thousands of young Marines and sailors that are truly on the pointy end and making us successful. So it's always a team effort. It's not about one person, it's about the team.
Yes. So you kind of rushing to the point already. Hierarchically, you have few generals and then a lot of junior enlisted, some junior officers, etc. It's those people though, sort of at the base of the hierarchical pyramid, that are really at the tippy point of the pyramid that actually get the work done. And the generals know that, including Mike Dana, Lieutenant General, retired. So Mike, give us a little bit of your background. I thank you for the bio. I got a feeling though that bio is kind of abbreviated. To the point. After 37 years, what's the essence? What are you doing these days? What's going on with Mike? What's that expertise, this background? Institute for Defense and Business. There's a lot of stuff in here. Give us a snapshot.
Yeah, I think what I'd like to do is kind of go back to, because you and I talked earlier, and I think we have similar backgrounds, but I was born and raised in upstate New York, outside of Syracuse. So similar weather pattern to you in Michigan right now. My father was a New York State police officer, had 6 uncles in World War II. My grandfather was in World War I, and he started a business in Manhattan. So I'm bringing this up because you're an entrepreneur. So my grandfather gets out of uniform in World War I, starts a wholesale florist business in New York City in Manhattan. And then he buys a tree farm in upstate New York, in Roscoe, New York, Trout Town, USA, even though I think people in the West that have real trout fishing would take exception to that. And then one of his sons, James, was a Marine in World War II, did the Roy Namor Kwajalein landing, was on Peleliu after the battle, then did occupation duty till November of 45. So what's interesting about him, I just want to tell this really quick story, but I think it personifies the Marine Corps, is he tried to enlist it because today is Pearl Harbor Day. All the great veterans still alive from that and those that sacrificed, thank you so much. But my uncle, Pearl Harbor, literally next week he tries to enlist in the Marine Corps. He can't get in because he's got like 2,400 vision. He's got really thick glasses. So he tries to come in, and then in 1943, he's finally drafted into the Marine Corps. And when he's for the physical, he can't read the numbers. So the doctor puts his hand behind his head and pushes his head right to this, right next to the screen, the numbers. He passes the test. And of course, what do they make him? An anti-aircraft gunner on 40 Mikes. So his crew said, hey, you're not going to be pulling the trigger. You're going to be loading the ammo. But the reason I came in the Marine Corps, and that's a long preamble, but is my uncle is the most incredible human being, the most motivated, energetic, adapt, overcome, mission-oriented man I ever knew. And I spent all my free time at school when I had vacation or breaks. I worked with him either in Manhattan or upstate. And from him, I learned work ethic. And then his stories about the Marine Corps energized me to become a Marine. And everything he sold me, so to speak, when I was a young teenager, came true when I joined the Marine Corps. Because for 37 years, I've had the absolute privilege of working with the most incredible, focused, motivated, genuine young men and women. And it was an incredible experience. And I have to admit, getting out, it's a shock because you're used to that family, that tribe. And then when you leave the tribe, you miss the tribe. I'll tell you that right now. But what I like to do now with various organizations is just talk about leadership, management, future war, and innovation. So that's more than you asked for, but I wanted to provide you that context.
I would say not more than I asked for. In fact, you hit some really wonderful tones there. Hey, let me just pull something out here a little bit because, look, this show is Vet Talks. Obviously, it doesn't matter if you're the Army, Air Force, Coast Guard, Space Command, Navy, and then, of course, the Marine Corps. It doesn't matter. We're both Marines, so we have that shared heritage, and so we might lean a little bit towards the Marine Corps just because of that shared heritage. But what we say is probably almost entirely true for all the branches. There is something about the Marine Corps, though, that gets this nickname even amongst all the other service members, right? We're the shock troops, which we're recognized as being the toughest, but then of course we're knuckle draggers. And if you know anybody in other service, they accuse all the Marines of eating crayons. Complete garbage. By the way, the red ones are my favorite. You're talking about the men and women in the Marine Corps and how incredibly bright they are. I know that, but I think maybe a lot of listeners don't understand that. And I introduced you, and your interests are, ranging from additive manufacturing to artificial and autonomous systems. Something doesn't compute. This way of thinking about Marines as shock troops, knuckle draggers, but additive manufacturing, artificial intelligence. What is really going on in the services today? Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think what I'd like to share with you, and you were part of it, you lived part of this, is when I came in the Marine Corps, I was commissioned in 1982, and I was an armor officer. Went to 2nd Tank Battalion to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. And my company commander, my platoon sergeants were all Vietnam vets. My battalion commander, Vietnam veteran. The division commander was a Korean War veteran. I mean, that's the legacy that we had. And those men, those leaders were absolutely incredible. But I'll be very candid. If you read a book, people would kind of look at you sideways and go, if you read a book, I mean, you need to be out in the field, you need to be working out. But one man changed, in my opinion, the Marine Corps for even better performance. And that was General Al Gray. So I'm a young lieutenant. He's our division commander. And I remember sitting in the office one day and there was a stack of books. And lieutenants, as you remember, lieutenants only get one office. There's 3 of us. You're not supposed to be in the office much because you're out there with the troops. But
that's right.
I looked at the books and I'm going, what are we supposed to do with those? And the battalion commander came down and he said, hey, General Gray says that we are not only a physically tough organization, but we're a thinking organization. And we're going to study warfare. We're going to learn lessons from the past. We're going to have dialogue, discussion about different military theorists and military battles. And we're going to apply those lessons learned to the future. He transformed the way the Marine Corps, he baked it into our DNA. Because there were a lot of smart Marines, since 1775, we've had a lot of brilliant Marines. But to me, he institutionalized training and education and brought us to a new level of, and I'll use the word, intellectual thought when it comes to the military profession. Because a lot of folks, perhaps because we don't inform them properly, do think that we're the knuckle draggers. But some of the brightest people I've ever met were young, middle-aged, and old, men and women, female Marines that just could look at a problem, and a very complex problem, and distill that problem down into actionable parts, and then apply resources against it, time, money, people, to get the job done. And as you know, in a combat environment, that decision-making cycle is very compressed. And you have to have recognition of decision-making skills, a foundation in warfighting to be able to look at that environment, grasp all the things that are going on, and then make good decisions to make sure people take the hill, but survive and fight another day. And I think that's what the Marine Corps is all about. We have a secret sauce that starts, I think, at boot camp on the way that we inculcate our culture and the way we think into young, not only recruits, but into young officer candidates. And then once they enter the fleet, I think we do a very good job of continuing to mold and educate and develop those leaders at every level. And we talked this a little bit before the show, but the caliber of the men and women that we have today is off the charts. I mean, just the questions that I would be asked. And the good news about that, it keeps you on your toes and makes you up your game. I mean, because when you're around young NCOs, young men and women in their 20s, and they're asking you questions about, well, sir, what do you think about additive manufacturing? What's this mean to the factory to foxhole design of military logistics? You sit there and, I used to go to my assistant, I go, where do we get people like this? Oh my God, this is awesome. So that's my overview on that, and look forward to any other questions related to it.
Well, fascinating, because I joined. I was commissioned and went active in 1990, just prior to the first Gulf War, about a year prior to. And all I knew at that point was that there was a professional reading list, and that we were supposed to be physical and mental warriors. So I wasn't there during the transition. I only knew that. And it was always about during my time in, and it sounds like it continued, probably intensified, Mike, and you can attest to this or not, but you had to be obviously very physically capable, and there was a PFT. But your continuing education, the books you were reading, you were logging this stuff with your battalion command. This stuff was all very much pushed, and it was critical for you to progress your mental fitness, or you weren't going to get promoted. Did that continue? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, I had the privilege of sitting on 11 promotion boards for various ranks, and it truly is the whole Marine concept. Physical fitness does play a part, appearance plays a part, but the most important part is performance. Yeah. At the end of the day, we promote people that have a proven track record of being able to get the job done. And then you also, and it's very important, you look at what potential do they have for the next level, either of staff or command. And it is overall a fair process, not a perfect process. I don't think there's a process anywhere that's perfect, but having sat on those boards, we truly do pick the best and brightest, for future assignments and increased rank down the road.
There is no perfect process, and I think that's an important point to make. And yet, one thing I know in the Marine Corps, of course, the Marine Corps is a large organization, right? I mean, there's corporations a lot bigger, but still 170,000 people is still a big organization. If the process isn't right, I always knew I had some corporal, some NCO chirping in my ear saying, Captain, it's not right. Why do we do it this way, et cetera. There's just a lack of fear in terms of challenging things that don't work.
Yes.
That is incredibly valuable, not just the Marine Corps, but that kind of skill set in general, this lack of fear and challenging things that don't work, because processes, I don't care where you're at, they're never going to be perfect. And you need people to have the courage to go, hey, boss, not so good. What can we do about it?
Yeah, you nailed it. And earlier you'd asked about innovation. So when in the Pentagon, I spent 4 years in the Pentagon. Those are dog years, by the way. I mean, Pentagon's it's a great place. And there's a lot of smart people, but it's challenging.
What's happening? I haven't been on Quantico and done some stuff in DC. I have a taste, just a tiny taste of it. I think I know what you mean.
What was absolutely critical in our innovation efforts, and you nailed it a second ago, is in the room, we would put people of different backgrounds, military occupational specialty, different gender, different age, different background, different ethnicity, because it's so critical when you're looking at a new initiative or previous processes or new technology and the capability you're trying to develop. If you have 10 people like me sitting around the table, you're going to get a stovepiped view of that. Whereas if you broaden the perspective to all these different people, they each have different experiences and background, and you learn so much because you think you're doing great. I mean, the general, I got this, I've got this figured out. Then, the corporal back row, like you said, will raise their hand and go, hey, sir, you thought about this? And you go, holy cow, I haven't thought about that. And that's absolutely brilliant. Good on you. And that rich mix of talent is so critical to move initiatives forward. Because in the Pentagon, it's designed this way because of McNamara and the PBS system, but it's the Borg. To use a Star Trek analogy, it takes a lot of energy to move an initiative forward. But when you get the young ones and not so young ones together with different ideas, you can beat the Borg. You can get capabilities developed that might not be viewed as mainstream.
Fascinating that you bring up the Borg, only because it's a great pivot into where I want to go with this. And you have a background beyond what I mentioned in the intro, autonomous systems and additive or advanced manufacturing, which, by the way, both real high tech endeavors. You've been spending a lot of time thinking beyond those activities and just thinking about like the future of war in general. I believe, is that you're thinking of the future of war in general? Is that right? I had to. Sorry, I had to. Are you spending time there? And if so, what are you doing there? And then I want to ask some questions like, what do you see of the future of war? But let's start with, what are you just sort of generally doing in that space?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you look back to the American Civil War, World War One, World War II. It's what I call a second industrial revolution fight. So the second industrial revolution, it's sail and steam, it's railroads, this is, Civil War era. Then we move into mass production, Eli Whitney's interchangeable parts, Ford's mass production line, the internal combustion engine, and just mass production. I mean, especially the United States, as we can create mass. And I'll give you a couple quick examples. World War One, the Germans think, okay, it's going to take the Americans 2 years to move 1 million men into the fight. We move 1 million, the first year, and 2 million by Armistice Day. Then if you go to World War II, which I talked about my uncles that served in that conflict, and think about what we did in such a short period of time. I mean, obviously we had a lead up in the late 30s to get there, but we're the arsenal of democracy. 2/3 of war material in that conflict is produced by American workers in American factories. 88,000 tanks, 303,000 aircraft, 2.4 million vehicles, 5,000 ship Navy, and nearly 17 million in uniform, which about 2/3 of those are sent either to the Pacific or the European theater. That's generating mass. I mean, that's how we did things. I mean, we just could literally throw weight at the problem. But then you look, third industrial revolution, and I'd say that, that's introducing things like mainframe computers, data, a little bit of robotics, those type of things. We see the advent of that in our private economy in the 60s, in the early 70s. And then it really takes hold, I think, for conflict that you were in. It's in Desert Storm, you start seeing the introduction of that third industrial revolution technology, because we have global positioning systems, we have advanced communications. I mean, things are getting better in terms of precision and be able to generate lethality. But then today, what I believe is that we're in the throes of the fourth industrial revolution. And there's multiple technologies that go into that. But I think the big three that we're focused on, or I'm focused on, because these are my views only, not the Marine Corps, not the other branches, just mine. But if you look at fourth industrial revolution warfare, first is going to be additive manufacturing and 3D printing, because the traditional design is factory to foxhole. I mean, nobody does it better than the United States, as we saw in World War II and even in these latest conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan. We have great global lines of communication. But what if you could move that factory closer to the foxhole or with the foxhole? That has unlimited potential. And in fact, in the Marine Corps, we were 3D printing small, what we call nibbler, small drones that could go do intelligence surveillance, reconnaissance, and those types of things. The next is artificial intelligence and machine learning. And that one really scares me. Now, I'll admit, I'm a poli-sci major, but when I talk to the scientists, they tell me that artificial intelligence at this point is not as mature as I think it is, because there's ways to kind of put it off balance. It can do some great things. Look at, AlphaGo, Deep Blue, beating the best chess master, best Go player. AI and machine learning can do some amazing things. But what I say back to these scientists is, hey, 20, 30 years from now, let's use 2035 as an anchor point. If you have a completely censored environment, then artificial intelligence and machine learning that can bring in all that data, aggregate it, distill it, and help humans make better decisions, that military organization will, in my opinion, fare better. And just a really quick vignette on that, if I would ask that you ever get a chance, Google or just research somebody by the name of it's a German general, because of course any military talk, we're going to talk about a dead German general, but it's Major General Hermann Balck, B-A-L-C-K, 7 times wounded in World War I. And on the Eastern Front, he's a Panzer Division, then later a Panzer Corps commander. And he literally is the Michael Jordan of combat. I mean, he never loses. And there's times that he's outnumbered 7-1, 5-1, but he always beats the Russians. So and he survives, by the way, and he teaches after the war.
That's remarkable in of itself.
Yeah, with all the different wounds that he received in in World War I and II. But if you think about today, if you took Balck and put him on a modern battlefield without AI machine learning capability, and then you took any country, but American general officer, let's say General Mattis or something like that, or General Neller, and said, okay, give that general AI machine learning enhancement, would he beat the German general? And I'd argue that AI, when it comes to its full maturity and capability level, we're going to win. We're going to beat the German general, because in history, it's always been generals and leaders that have had a really innate sense of the battlefield. But I do believe that with this emerging technology and man-machine teaming, like Kasparov talks about in his book, Deep Thinking, he's mad that the machine beat him in chess, but hey, if I team with the machine, I'm going to be even much better. It's the same principle here. And I think that's absolutely critical. The third technology is autonomous platforms. And these are the ones that worry me the most. I'm very, very concerned. And I'd ask folks to Google or research on YouTube Dr. Will Roper in the Air Force. And there's a clip of him on a 60 Minutes episode where there's an F-18 and it discharges several, I think dozen, close to 100 different small drones that disaggregate at high altitude and then aggregate and hit a target on the ground. So it doesn't cost a lot of money to make those. I mean, obviously you need a safe, cyber safe kind of control system that they can, aggregate, disaggregate, control those. But think about the asymmetric advantage that those systems could play against expensive ships, against expensive aircraft. So whoever comes up with that to defeat that asymmetric capability, it's a good investment for national defense. Because I think for pennies on the dollar, this is something we need to be really looking at. So,
you said so much that was interesting, Mike, so much. It strikes me that if you took that German general and you put them in charge of the conventional military forces that still dominate the battlefield today, not all that much has changed. I mean, you're still fighting a largely kinetic battle. And yes, there's a lot of spectrum stuff going on. The technologies have changed. Of course, the tanks are better, faster. But are the tanks necessary? These are the kind of questions that were right on the precipice, right up to now. The battlefield would be fought, Desert Storm, Desert Shield, it was fought in much the same way. But what I think I hear you saying is this artificial intelligence, autonomous system, these various new advances stand to change the nature of battlefield so that maybe, just maybe, that general wouldn't even recognize the battlefield. And it occurs to me, you said one of the scariest things was AI and machine learning. How about AI and machine guns in the back of a Nissan, right? I mean, this is is the claim. I think it's highly exaggerated to kind of direct attention to large, sophisticated endeavors or countries or agencies that could pull something off. But the notion is that a scientist was killed in Iran using a machine gun, and there was artificial intelligence involved. I don't know anything about that, and that's not the point. But I do know something about what I'm about to say, and I think you do too. I mean, they're already using drones against us on battlefields in the crudest of fashion. They're dropping grenades in our compounds, aren't they? I mean, have you ever been in a compound that had a grenade dropped on you through some cheap drone? And look at what's happened over there in just our east friends over there, just east of Germany and a little bit of west of Russia, and the conflict they're fighting, and how the underdogs are actually beating the conventional forces with drones. I mean, is this change where the Germans general would totally recognize the conventional battlefield to something different? Is that imminent? Is that going to take a while? I mean, what are your thoughts on this?
I'd like to build on that by saying, if you look at traditional Second Industrial Revolution warfare, it's primarily a sea, subsea, air, land fight. It's those three domains. A lot going on in those domains. I would say that today you not only have those domains, but you have space, cyber, and this I get a lot of pushback on, but I'm going to push it, is the perception domain. And where I'm going with that is social media and its ability to manipulate what you think, what the populace thinks, what your foe thinks, because there's ways there to
push back
to adjust. Say again.
Who would push back?
I'm going to protect the guilty. There's some that I've had discussions with that don't agree with that, because it's not technically a domain, perception. But to me, perception and time are two critical elements in war fighting. If they're not a domain, I get it, but there are things that impact how you make decisions, outcomes of battles, that type of thing. But to your point is, I want to talk space and cyber real quick. There's another 60 Minutes episode with Leslie Stahl, and she's driving a late model vehicle. I drive an 84 Chevy, so I'm safe on this one, truck. But she's driving a very late model car, and there's a young man, like 3 miles away, and he's on his laptop, and he shuts the brakes off to the car. The car, she's driving. She's in a large area. She's safe, but she doesn't have brakes. So think about in a future war where you have the ability in the cyber realm to shut down power plants. I'm talking domestically here. Shut down power plants, water treatment. Get into your military systems and create things that don't allow you to do your command and control and what you're supposed to do. So I think the nature of warfare hasn't changed because it's still combat, lethality, and death, and all the horrific things that go with that. But one thing mankind is very good at, and I'm not sure this is a good thing, but it's a necessary thing, is developing technology to create a competitive advantage against the folks that we're going to potentially go against. And to me, you've got to be able to not only see air and land, which we have some great systems, and we're very good at making very good combat systems, but we're getting there, and we're very good also in the space and cyber realm. But it's that ability to weave it all together into an operational design that all those elements, you have competitive advantage, but you might have some weaknesses, and you've got to be able to protect those weaknesses in a temporal way, for a period of time to make sure that you maintain advantage. And the other thing about, I think, today's battlefield is it's getting larger and larger and more distributed. So the force that can project force in what I call a disaggregated way, so it's protected, and so it's not like one target, but they can come together quickly. That's the type of force we want to generate. And I think the Marine Corps is really good at that because, we did that in World War II. We could do it today, I think, to even a higher and better level.
It's interesting, and I'm conflicted on the future of conflict a little bit, and I'll get into that in a second. I would say anybody that doesn't realize that, as you call it, perception is a domain, fails to realize we've been doing PSYOPs forever. And now what we've done is we've created technologies that are a force multiplier to PSYOPs, and it's called social media. There's no question that, we know, and this isn't, page 6 conspiracy news. I don't deal in that. That's not my background, and I'm a technologist by trade here. But we know that there have been foreign agencies tampering in, social media to various different effects. I won't get into the details of it, and people can speculate on the many different things they've been doing. But we do know that is the case, and it's not necessarily the things that people first think of, maybe. And yet we know PSYOPs are being conducted against it. But the thing I'm conflicted about, the thing I don't necessarily know is I'm a student and a follower of Ray Kurzweil, right? This guy's a guy who talks about
is near, yeah.
And we're seeing this trend where conflict is getting more intense, but less broadly lethal. In other words, the conflicts are being settled with lots of violence, but a lot less fatalities because of precision. However, if you go in the other direction, which is the future of war is being waged against the populace, there's the perception side. But Mike, you brought it up. Anybody should read a great journalistic piece by Tom Brokaw called Lights Out, and they should follow it by a fictional narrative called 1 Second After. And if you want to be terrified with the implications are on a broad scale of a future war and what that means to, you, me, our family members that, maybe serve or don't serve, then we need to be rather scared. But I'm not here to scare people. I'm just, is it going to be precision? Is it going to be conflict? Is it going to be machine guns and autonomous systems taking out a single scientist? Or is it going to be disrupting and even possibly removing the power grid for entire populations? So what do you think? Or maybe it's both. What are your thoughts?
I think it could be all the above. I think a good book to read, it's a little dated, but in 1999, 2 PLA Chinese colonels wrote a book called Unrestricted Warfare. And essentially what that talks about is waging conflict. It's what we call phase 0, but it's it's conflict before conflict until you actually get into a kinetic, shooting match. But the key themes of the book are, and they do a very good job of it, is they look at the entire diplomatic, information, military, economic, the dime spectrum, and their view is that they're going to take time. I mean, this isn't it's going to happen tomorrow, but they're going to use all different elements of national power for their country to gain competitive advantage. And I think that approach has merit just because it's all inclusive and it doesn't neglect any of the tools that are available to a nation. But I also think on the flip side is the United States has shown historically an incredible ability to innovate, to generate needed capabilities. I mean, again, if you look at World War II, Vannevar Bush, who was FDR's science guy, wrote a book, Modern Arms and Free Men. I mean, it's literally the testimony to American industrial might to defeat, two foes in a two-front war. So where I'm going with this is I wouldn't sell the United States short because we've got really bright people. We've got we've got think tanks, we've got labs, folks that are looking at these problems. And I know from sometimes on the outside, it looks like it's not moving fast enough, but I would argue that, we've got some really smart folks working some really hard problems. And I think that's good for us in the future to make sure that our defense remains strong.
I am an unapologetic American patriot. I love this country, and I acknowledge that we have faults and flaws. And I know that through my travel to 50, 60, 70 different countries around the world, having that broad experience, it's still the best of a lot of them. And I accept us for our flaws and know that, like we started this conversation, every process and every population is imperfect.
Yeah.
And to improve, and that's what makes us great, because we have to improve. And let's acknowledge it again. Pearl Harbor, this is commemoration of the day the sleeping giant was awakened for World War II, and the Battle of the Pacific. Not to get too arcane on military knowledge, the Battle of the Pacific turned in one of the most decisive battles. It was the Battle of Midway, and that's when, by a stroke of genius and a stroke of luck. It's good to be good, and it's good to be lucky. It's best to be good and lucky. By a stroke of fortune and brilliance and luck, we sank the Japanese key 4 carriers. And yet, while I was seen to be so decisive, we were kicking out at least one carrier. I think it was multiple carriers per month out of the United States industrial yard. Maybe it was in the dozens of carriers per month, meaning that one decisive move, if we had lost 4 carriers, it meant nothing. It really meant nothing because of the capacity of this country to go into fight. And that was done not because of some lieutenant general somewhere dictating it, right, because of what you said, because of the women and men in our support in our country, and of course in the supporting services and the services themselves, building, innovating, etc. So let's move to innovation. It sounds like, regardless of whether it's remains kinetic, really, really precision conflict, machine guns and drones with grenades, or drone with grenade is very imprecise, but it's very small, or it's related to the societal wide attack. I mean, what is the role of innovation in the future of being successful? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the one area that, and we are improving, but DoD, writ large, is creating venues and mechanisms to tap into the creative energy of our younger, Marine soldiers, sailors, airmen. I mean, and there's been great strides done in that. I mean, in other services, the Air Force, Marine Corps, degree, Army, Navy. But I think the key thing is, for innovation, I'll just use the Marine Corps example in logistics. We created a team called the Next Generation Logistics Team, NextLog. And the principles for innovation in the DoD bureaucracy are, number one, keep it small. Because anytime you create a new office or a new entity within DoD, it's kind of like people, what's that? And that could be a threat to my time, my resources, my money, to attention. I mean, those types. So you got to keep it small. And then when it's small, pick 2 or 3 ideas that, there's hundreds of great ideas out there, and they are all good. But at the end of the day, you got to prioritize it, because you have limited resources, because you're starting out small. So we kept it small, and then additive manufacturing was really one of the top things that we were pushing because for logistics, that has significant positive implications. So what we were able to do, it's got nothing to do with me, it was the team that put this together, is they were able to fully bake this idea. And these are young majors and captains. I mean, these are people in their late 20s, early 30s, and they completely bake this idea. They're comfortable with the technology. So rule number 2 is, as you're keeping it small, bake, really bake and get a great idea, then you need a resource sponsor. In our case, it was the head of programs and resources, General Walters, Citadel grad, electrical engineer, really bright, understood the technology. So when we went in and pitched it to him, you've got money. So money is the oxygen of innovation. I mean, you need the creative energy, but you need the oxygen to move it along. So he gave us money to move that forward. Then the third principle we found in next log and innovation of the Marine Corps, and this is not to be obsequious, but it's give credit to others, because people will feel threatened by technology or new ideas, but if you make them part of the process and then they help you with the process, give them credit. I mean, you know what you're doing. You don't need to be putting that on a banner and go, hey, we did this. It's more important to create a team effort where everybody's rowing together, understands the utility and the value of the idea that you're bringing forth. So that's what we learned on the innovation side. I would say at manufacturing, we did a pretty good job. The team did. Autonomous platforms, we're getting there. Then the AI machine learning, that one's really hard. That's a wicked problem. I mean, that one's really hard, but still moving forward on all 3 of those.
Yeah, I mean, I look at well, you again said a lot of good stuff, and those mechanisms to overcome that friction when you innovate something new. I mean, you look at the corporate world. The corporate world hates new ideas. That's why incumbents are getting slaughtered out there, right? And the difference is they might lose margin. The worst case, they might go out of business. But you have to innovate in the military, because losing means you're losing lives. And that's not just something that rolls off the tongue. It's not just some BS. It's absolutely true. And we both know people that never came back because of bad processes, bad decisions, bad intelligence, meaning bad information. And we have to constantly strive to improve that, because the competition is. I was reading something of a number of your articles, and which are very good. I encourage everybody to look up Lieutenant General Mike Dana and his writing on innovation and future war. I was reading something where you had at one point called China a near peer, and I would argue that now they're actually probably a peer. That's how fast it probably has changed since the time you wrote that. I can't remember what it was, but I think that it's no longer having near peers in the world. It's peers. And for our corporations, it's exactly the same. These incumbents that have been there forever, superpowers, if you will, in their respective industries, are now being attacked by firms that they really didn't even know existed, maybe just a handful of years or even 6 months ago. And if you do not have those mechanisms you talked about, and the culture of leadership, followership, and courage to go up against those things you were talking about, Mike, in terms of not invented here. You don't build that, then you are that woolly mammoth with 2 legs in the tar pit, and you probably don't even know it yet. Hey, Mike, we're going to move to a wrap here. This has been awesome. I got a couple of things I want to do. I want to ask you a couple of questions. This is kind of like the Actors Guild, but I'm not nearly cool like that, but it is Actors Guild-like question, but it's not your color red. What's your favorite color where you go red, gold, that kind of thing. I want to ask you, 37 years of service, what's that one thing that you're most proud of from that military service?
Yeah, I'd say and I mentioned it earlier, is how the Marine Corps continues to grow and develop and get even better and attract the best talent that we have in the United States. And the caliber, and this is nothing against people on the outside. I mean, it's you said this earlier, this is the best country on the planet. I mean, I've been to not as many countries as you. I've been to 37 countries. Everybody, America, this America. Hey, go live over there and see if you want to live there. You want to live here. This is the place to be.
I was counting Texas as a country, though, so I'm not sure.
Touche. But just on how the Marine Corps continues to mature, develop, innovate, and move it forward. And we have problems, we have flaws, but what I'm most proud of, I'm just proud to have been able to serve in an organization that meant so much in terms of a greater good. I mean, the thing about the Marine Corps, and you know this from serving in the Marine Corps, we don't like the verbal pronoun. It's not I, it's not me, it's we, and it's the team. And that's something I just find missing. And maybe I'm looking at the wrong places in my second career here, but it's there's different incentives to motivate people. And I think, and that's a very generic statement. I mean, there's companies out there that are very positive and probably Marine Corps like, but I'll just say it again, is the Marine Corps machine is just a wonderful organization that creates just incredible, irreversible momentum.
Well, and you, as a Lieutenant General, and just as a Marine, you had your part in building that. And for that, a grateful nation thanks you. And thanks, in your mind, no doubt, more importantly, those many Marines that you served with during your 37 years. We're going to move to a wrap here. But before we do, I got a couple things I want to get out. First, I want to thank our sponsor, Supreme Lending. This is a lending organization, I love the title, led by Michael Chastain. This is another proud American veteran who's gotten out and is doing fantastic things. You can see his email, you can see his number on the screen. I'm going to say his number anyway, 972-546-1932. Please make sure you call him if you have any lending needs. Again, an excellent organization, and you'd be helping a veteran-owned organization at the same time. And then I want to end with a call to action here, and I want to be specific. Look, if you've tuned into this, if you have any interest in anything we've talked about, Vet Talks or Project Reload, the parent partner organization, and you want help bringing in the best, the most amazing men and women that you just heard Lieutenant General Mike Dana talk about, please contact us here at Vet Talks or Project Reload, and do so at info, I-N-F-O, at projectrelo.org. That's projectrelo.org. Or call us at our toll-free number, 877-760-7356. Now, of course, we want you to like us on Facebook, like us on YouTube. In fact, love us if you can. You can always put love in the comments section. And by the way, we're on LinkedIn too. We don't promote that channel very much, but we probably should. So we want to thank you. Thank you for tuning in. And we want to thank you for helping us bring these kind of stories, like the stories you just heard, to light. Because the more we understand about our military members, and the more we understand what they actually do, it's not the war stories only. It's not the sob stories. It's about the quality and the character of our American veterans, the women and men that serve, and why they would be such great additions to your respective organizations post their careers. So contact us, learn more. We'll connect you with the very best that you can find. Men and women, sort of like Lieutenant General Mike Dana, but maybe a little bit, say, younger than myself. So but we help the whole spectrum, of course. We love all veterans, and not just Marines. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you so much for listening to Vet Talks. Thank you, and goodbye.